Pre-season testing for the 2025 Formula 1 season is only just around the corner, meaning it is time to get into some early predictions for the 2025 season. A 2025 season that is very highly anticipated, possibly the most anticipated we've had in quite a long time. The possibility of multiple drivers fighting for the Drivers' World Championship and multiple teams fighting for the Constructors makes 2025 must-see. But of course, we haven't had any running so far, so we don't know at all what the performance level of the cars is like. So these predictions are going to be based off of pretty much how the end of 2024 was looking and how I think that will evolve through 2025. Before we get started properly, make sure to smash a like button on this video and comment down below your predictions for 2025 when it comes to the top 10 for the Constructors' Championship and the top 10 for the driver's side as well. But we're going to start with the Constructors. And we're going to start from the back to the front. And in 10th place, I think, for 2025, no surprise, will be yet again Sauber. They were very poor in 2024, did find some improved pace at the very end of the season, but they were still quite slow compared to anyone who was actually in the midfield and scoring points. They do have a better driver lineup, I feel, for this year in Hülkenberg and the Formula 2 champion Gabriel Bortoleto compared to the driver lineup of last year, Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. That will help in certain races, but not in every Grand Prix. The car performance is still going to be, by far, for this team, the most important area. And clearly, this team is just waiting for 2026, when, of course, they become the Audi Formula 1 team, where we have a completely new set of rules. So, last in the championship, I think it will be. Also, that will benefit them in 2026, finishing last in the championship, because of course going into or through the first half of 2026, they'll have the most time in the wind tunnel to develop. In 9th place, I am going for Racing Bulls, a team that in 2024 I had very high hopes for and I thought would have a very good season, but it just never quite got going, especially in the second half of the season. They had I would say, a good driver lineup from last year, and it was performing most of the time in the midfield, but the car itself, I think, was a letdown. They started the year with a good car, it was competitive in that midfield, but it just never really seemed to get better after, say, the Spanish Grand Prix in 2024, which was like round 10 or 11 of the 2024 season. You had teams towards the end of the year like Haas and Alpine, who had clearly passed Racing Bulls in terms of pace and performance, and I don't really see why that's going to change, at least in the first half of 2025, given that the rules, of course, are the same pretty much going into this season. Maybe with some better development, they can maybe have a better, say, second half of the season than what they had in 2024, which again, I felt was quite disappointing. But I just don't see, especially with their driver lineup getting worse for 2025 compared to what they had in 2024, with Isaac Hadjar coming into the team to replace Liam Lawson, I just don't see this team being anywhere near, say, your Haas's or even your Alpines in 2025. Maybe I'm really underselling them. We'll see. I hope I am wrong. I've always liked this team, but I just don't get a good feeling with them at all based off of really the momentum or lack thereof they had in the final few races of 2024. In 8th place, I am going for the Alpine team, a team that ended 2024 very quickly, but I still think are going to have a troubled season in 2025. This is, of course, the final year of Renault engines for quite a while. It probably will be in Formula 1, and that is still going to be a problem for them because the Renault engine is the weakest on the grid in terms of pure performance. And that is really why those engines are going away, because Renault have never consistently produced good enough power units ever since 2014. But even though I think Alpine will start the year with a good car in that midfield pack, the issue they have got is their driver lineup. Pierre Gasly, no issue with him. He had a fantastic, I think, final 6-7 races of the 2024 season. But with Esteban Ocon leaving the team, a relationship that I feel as though needed to end, because clearly they had come to an end, they don't have a replacement that is as good or as consistent, I feel, as what they had in Ocon. For the moment, his replacement is Jack Doohan, and the reason I say for the moment is because it could quite easily change to being Franco Colapinto, a driver that Alpine think very highly of. If Doohan doesn't perform, Colapinto will be in the car probably by the time we get to Miami at the latest. Is Colapinto, though, going to do as good of a job as Ocon did at Alpine in the few years that he raced for the team? Even though I like Colapinto, probably not. At least not immediately in 2025. Colapinto still has, I think, a bit to develop to get to maybe the best level he can get to in his career. But yeah, mainly because of the driver lineup and probably what is going to be a lack of consistency and performance from whoever the number 2 driver is at this team, I think that will cost Alpine quite a lot in a midfield pack that is going to be still, very close. And your driver lineup and its consistency and quality is very important in the midfield and can cost you a lot of points through the course of a season. And that's actually why I have got for 7th place in 2025 Williams, because number 1, their driver lineup of Carlos Sainz and Alexander Albon in a Williams car that should be, I think, at least decent in 2025. I think the Williams car wasn't great in 2024. There were some good moments, there were some not so good moments, but I think things will be better for their performance in 2025. With the much better driver lineup they now have, that will benefit them a lot to fighting for points on a consistent basis. And this driver lineup means that Williams have, for the first time in a while, a strong driver lineup. Probably for the first time since they had Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa in their car all the way back in 2016, which, amazingly, was nearly 10 years ago. But as long as the car can deliver and be a car that is consistently able to fight for P9, P10 on a regular basis, I don't see why Sainz and Albon can't consistently be picking up a point here, a point there, and then when you have the odd race where, a few of the top cars are out of the race or having issues for whatever reason, I don't see why Williams can't be scoring even more points. Maybe a 5th place or a 6th place if we have, a wet race at a certain track. It's been the biggest weakness of the Williams team in the last few years, the driver lineup. Even if you look back in 2023 when they finished in 7th in the championship, which was all because of Alexander Albon, it was a good season, but if Williams had had a good driver alongside Albon in that car, Williams could have done even better that season and could have had way more points finishes than they ended up having. But now there is no excuse for the Williams team. If they produce the car, they should be consistently fighting for points with 2 very good drivers. 6th place, I am going to go with Aston Martin. Now, I know Adrian Newey does start for the Aston Martin team very soon in his work as technical director, but he's not going to have really that much of an effect on the Aston Martin car of 2025. His main work is going to be towards 2026, which the teams can now start working on as it is now 2025. So I don't think Adrian Newey is really going to help this team that much, if at all, when it comes to the 2025 machine. I don't see them fixing all of a sudden their issues with correlation from the wind tunnel to the track. Maybe they can improve it a bit, but until they actually show that they are improving on that problem, I am not going to sit here and not factor that in as to that being a problem for them in 2025. And the 2025 season is essentially for Aston Martin going to be the same as what we saw last year. I think they'll start the year probably as one of the best, if not the best midfield team. Then when we get into the European season where development starts, they'll fall away and probably by the end of the season have one of the worst cars on the grid. That is, I'm afraid, just how it's going to go, because this team still, again, has not proven that they can actually develop this car at all, and, of course, are now working on 2026, which is very important for this team. But in the midfield this time, there is going to be a team, I think, that will actually capitalise on Aston Martin's lack of development. And that team will be Haas F1, who I think will finish 5th in 2025. Reason being is because through 2024, and especially towards the end of 2024, they had a consistent good car, and I don't see why that's going to suddenly change at the start of 2025. I can see them easily carrying that through, that momentum to 2025. And most importantly, they might actually have a better driver lineup for this year than they had last year. Nico Hülkenberg obviously was very good last year. He was very consistent for the Haas team. Kevin Magnussen, though, was still very inconsistent, and that's why he ended up getting the boot from the team. Now, they have got Oliver Behrman starting his first full-time F1 season, and he will be partnering Esteban Ocon, who, yes, last season wasn't great in, let's be honest, an Alpine car that was pretty terrible. But if you look at the seasons before that, Ocon was consistently one of the best performers from the midfield and was at least very consistent. So if Behrman and Ocon both perform at their best in 2025 and the car continues in the same vein of form it was in towards the end of 2024, I don't see why Haas can't take on Aston Martin and by the end of the season be ahead of them. 2024 definitely showed that there was a bit more potential, at least for the Constructors' Championship, for this team. If they were just a bit more consistent, they would have ended up finishing 6th ahead of Alpine, but that wasn't to be. And I guess they are my surprise pick for the 2025 season. We'll see in pre-season testing whether they are carrying over that good pace from 2024. I really hope they are. And we'll see how 2025 goes. But watch out for Haas F1. I'm pretty sure they are going to be a dark horse for that 5th place in the championship. Now let's move on to the top 4 positions and the top teams pretty much in the Constructors' Championship. 4th place, I think, will be Mercedes-Benz. As I've explained before in earlier streams, Mercedes, I don't think fundamentally are able to fix the key issues with their car that they've had in the last few years. Also, like Aston Martin, still having problems with correlation and the right parts working for their car that they developed back at base and through the wind tunnel and all of that. It is still an issue for this Mercedes team, and I think at the odd race, they will be very competitive and they will win maybe 3-4 races over the course of the year. But that is not enough, of course, to win a championship. In 3rd place, I am going Red Bull Racing. I think Red Bull will not be as inconsistent with their car performance in 2025 as they were in 2024. Of course, 2024 started the year very, very quick, way quicker than everybody else. They were over half a second a lap quicker than the next best car. Then the teams closed right up on them. Then they fell off a cliff. And then they got back on it in the final, I think 6 races it was, of the year. It won't be as inconsistent as that, but mainly because of the driver lineup they've got compared to McLaren and Ferrari, I just don't see Red Bull finishing any higher than 3rd. Max Verstappen will have a great season and he'll have, I'm sure, a great championship campaign, whether he wins the championship or not. Liam Lawson, though, even though I like Liam Lawson, he is nowhere near as good, I think, as the drivers Ferrari have or McLaren have, and will be nowhere near, a lot of the time, the fight for race wins, and probably a lot of the time the fights even for podiums. Of course, if Red Bull return to having easily the best car on the grid, Lawson, I'm sure, will be on the podium quite a few times. But if the Red Bull car starts the year as it ended 2024, I'd be surprised if you see Liam Lawson on the podium that many times in the 2025 season. In second place, I am going for the Ferrari team. The Ferrari team that was so close to winning the Constructors' Championship in 2024. Less than 20 points, I think it was, in the end. And it will be around about the same gap. They will be behind McLaren, who I think will win the Constructors' Championship for a second year in a row. The reason I don't think Ferrari will win the Constructors' Championship is, as I explained in my video on Ferrari's 2025 chances, I just don't think they will have, through the year from start to finish, as good of a car as McLaren. I think McLaren will start the year with a faster car. But most importantly, McLaren will develop their car better than Ferrari, because McLaren have been easily the best team on the grid at developing and improving their car over the course of a season in the last couple years. That is what will separate McLaren and Ferrari in 2025. If both Ferrari drivers are at their best, obviously Ferrari have got the better driver lineup, and that will help keep them close to McLaren through the course of the season. But because McLaren will have the better car consistently, not by much, but by a tenth or two, I think consistently through the season they'll have the better car. That will allow McLaren to win another Constructors' Championship. With their drivers, Lando Norris, I'm expecting similar levels of performance to last year. Definitely in qualifying, I'm expecting good levels of performance there. Oscar Piastri, I am expecting an improvement. I don't know how big of an improvement to expect from him. He did have some really good moments in 2024, but also had some races and weekends where he was just absolutely nowhere near as on it as he should have been. So maybe he'll be more consistent in 2025, we'll have to see. But as I said a moment ago, McLaren's performance is what will win them the Constructors' Championship in 2025. Because as I said, if Ferrari, if their driver lineup is performing at its absolute best, and it was a competition of the best driver lineup wins the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari obviously would win the championship. But performance is what it will get the job done for McLaren at the end of the day. Now let's go on to the Drivers' Championship side. And for the Drivers' side, I am only going to predict the top 10. And of course, we'll start from 10th all the way to who I think will be the world champion. In 10th place, because Haas will be very strong in 2025, I'm going for Oliver Bearman. Yes, in his first full F1 season, I think he will get into the top 10 of the championship. I think he will be the main man for Haas. It will be interesting to see how he gets on against Ocon in his first full season. If he is to beat Ocon head-to-head, that would be an incredible start. Because Ocon is a good driver. Don't disrespect Ocon too much. He's a very good midfield caliber driver. And if Bearman was to come in his first full season and outdo him in races and even qualifying, that would be a very good start to his Formula One career. So, and I think Bearman will, at least when it comes to head-to-head on the points side, on the race side, I think Bearman will beat Ocon in 2025 and just about claim a place in the top 10 of the championship. The performance of the car will help, and I think the performance of the car will remain good throughout the season. But Bearman, if you look back at some of his performances in 2024 when he had to step in Brazil, he did get a bit carried away, you could argue. He did spin, I think, a bit too many times. But on all the other times he stepped in, he did a fantastic job, whether it was for Ferrari or that race he did in Baku where he finished in the points. So, yeah, Oliver Bearman, I am really expecting a big year from him. And I think he is, without doubt, one of the drivers to look out for in 2025. In ninth place will be Fernando Alonso. Aston Martin will still be good enough, say at least half or maybe even most of the time, to get points finishes. And because Alonso is still such a great driver, especially compared to the midfield drivers he's racing against, I still think he claims a top 10 position in the championship. Please, Aston Martin, give this guy a car that can actually win races. That's what this guy deserves. In 8th place, Liam Lawson. He won't be as bad as Sergio Perez. He'll be a bit better, but not absolutely massively better. He's still going to get absolutely destroyed by Max Verstappen, just like Perez did. Maybe not as embarrassingly, but it will still be absolute destruction from Max. As long as Lawson is consistently making the top 10, though, in that Red Bull, in, say, qualifying in the races, even if he's towards the back end of the top 10 a lot of the time, if the Red Bull car is not that great and is nowhere near maybe as dominant as it was a year ago, then you can't really blame him. So I wouldn't really be that critical necessarily of Lawson if he was to finish 8th in the championship. In 7th place, I'm going Kimi Antonelli. Of course, making his long-awaited debut in Formula 1. This is a guy who very well could be the next Max Verstappen, the next Lewis Hamilton, the next Schumacher or Senna. There is a lot of hype surrounding this guy, rightfully so. He is an incredible talent at such a young age. But the main question to ask is, will he beat George Russell in 2025? That would be an incredible thing if he was able to do it, especially in the way that Russell did to Hamilton in 2024. That would be a clear indication that, yes, this guy is the next, say, chosen one of Formula 1 and of motorsport in general. But it's going to be incredibly hard to do because Russell, if we look at last year, if Russell keeps up that level of performance we saw in 2024, he's going up against one of the top probably 5 best drivers in Formula 1. Russell, I thought in 2024 was, I think I had him ranked as the 3rd best driver for the season. If Russell again keeps that form up, it's going to take something absolutely incredible from Antonelli to be even consistently on the same pace as Russell. So I can't wait to find out, but I am not brave enough as of yet to sit here and say he will beat Russell in 2025. I'd love to see it happen because I am a big fan of this guy and I really hope he is the next elite level driver, but I want to see a couple races first to really determine whether he is actually going to be that good. And then just ahead of him, I've got George Russell in 6th place. Like I said, I'm not going to go with Antonelli ahead of Russell just yet. Russell should maintain the performance level he was on last year. There's no reason why he should dramatically drop off. And this is also, for Russell, an important year. Lewis Hamilton now gone from the team. Obviously, he was the team leader for so long. And Russell is now, at least for this year, until maybe Max Verstappen joins the team, who knows, he is now the team leader. And if he wants to stay at this team and make himself a success at this team, he has got to make sure he beats Antonelli and shows who is the number 1 at Mercedes-Benz. Similar to how Norris has done at McLaren, even with Piastri coming in and, you know, doing well in certain races and in certain moments. Russell has got to, you know, stamp his foot down and say, you know, this is my team. And as long as he beats Antonelli clearly, then he can absolutely say that. But the reason I've got him in 6th is because, as I said earlier, with Mercedes, I don't think they're going to be that great. And a lot of the time will be 4th best out of the top 4 teams. 5th, I am going to go Lewis Hamilton. Now, of course, I have Ferrari behind McLaren in the championship, so I don't think Ferrari are going to, you know, have the best car this season or dominate the championship. But I think Lewis will be better than he was in 2024. He is coming into, I think, at the moment, a better team. Certainly a team that has, in terms of momentum and just looking at last year, a better car. and should be, at least drivability-wise, better for him than what he had at Mercedes in 2024. So, again, he will be better, but I don't think he is just going to suddenly return to peak Lewis Hamilton levels. We have to remember Lewis is getting on in age, and he is getting to that part of his career where he hasn't got that many years left, and you would have to eventually expect, even with the very best drivers of all time, there to eventually be a drop-off in performance. I mean, look at Michael Schumacher when he came back to Formula One with Mercedes. Yeah, he did take a 3-season break, but eventually, even if he had stayed in Formula One in 2007, 8 and 9, Michael would have showed those obvious signs of decline that we then clearly saw when he came back to Formula One. So maybe this is the beginning of, maybe not the end, but the beginning of a slow decline of Lewis Hamilton. We'll have to see. But I don't think it will be as bad of a season for him as it was last year. He will win at least one race, probably more than one race, given how competitive I think Ferrari will be. But I don't think he'll be as good as Leclerc, because I think Leclerc is, right now, outside of Max Verstappen, the best driver on the grid. Again, outside of Max Verstappen. So I don't think he'll be able to quite match Leclerc over the 2025 season. And I just don't think Hamilton will have maybe that consistency that he had before in his peak. But no doubt, over the course of the season, we will see Lewis at his best and see him, on the podium. I'm sure he'll get pole position. Like I said, I'm sure he'll win a couple races, but it will not be peak Lewis Hamilton. I don't just see a dramatic return to that type of form, and I think it's going to be maybe not clear confirmation, but maybe further confirmation that Lewis is, again, slowly on the decline, which is why I am going for Hamilton in 5th place. In 4th, I'm going Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. I think Piastri is, maybe not in qualifying, but in the races, I think will be a lot closer to Lando Norris than he was last year. We did see in certain sections of 2024, Piastri was able to be right there with Lando, if not outperforming Lando, especially around the summer break time. Where, we had obviously Piastri win in Hungary, then almost win at Spa. Then you had the Italian and Azerbaijan Grand Prix as well, where Piastri was performing at such a good level compared to Lando. I think that will become a bit more consistent, that type of thing happening in 2025. But ultimately, because Oscar still won't be able to match Lando in qualifying, I think that's why he'll still be behind Lando in 2025 and in the championship standings. But he will be closer, no doubt about it. He is getting better all the time, and with some of the top performances he put in last year, that will give him confidence going into 2025, especially that he knows that he's very likely to have, from the start of the year, a car that can win him the championship if on race day he can be consistently great. So, yeah, very much looking forward to seeing Oscar this season, but I think 4th place of the championship is where he will end up. And just ahead of him, Lando Norris, his teammate, and I think it will be a similar year for Lando compared to 2024. In qualifying, he'll be very, very quick, especially in what I think will be just about the fastest car over the course of the season. But ultimately in the races, I don't think we're going to see a significant improvement on what we saw last year. He will still make mistakes. He'll still lose positions at the start and still prove to be, compared to the very elite drivers, I wouldn't say completely inadequate, but inadequate enough to where it's costing him key points in the championship battle. No doubt he'll be in the championship battle, especially with a car as quick as I think it will be, but he just won't get the job done, again, for the same reasons as we saw in 2024. 2nd place in the championship, I am going Charles Leclerc. And as long as, really, he keeps up the form we saw in 2024, which was outstanding, really, for most of the season, and Ferrari do have a good, consistent car through the year, then I think Leclerc is the closest person who can challenge Max Verstappen for the Drivers' Championship in 2025. Ultimately, the reason I think he comes up short is because, actually a couple reasons. One, I don't quite trust Ferrari fully to give him absolutely everything he needs over the course of the season. For example, even though for most of 2024 Ferrari had a good car, remember that mid-season dip they had? That might happen again. It does tend to happen at times with this team. So, again, I'm not fully trusting a Ferrari just yet. I need to see more evidence to really trust them going forward if I was a Leclerc fan. So, we'll see whether Ferrari could remain as consistent as possible over the course of the year. But also, in a head-to-head scrap between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, in qualifying, I think you could say Leclerc, when at his best, has the edge. But in the races, Max Verstappen, as long as the car is good enough, is still the king on race day. And that is what is going to decide ultimately, of course, because points are mostly scored on the Sunday in Formula 1. And if Leclerc wants to win the championship, he has got to be absolutely every single Sunday Grand Prix getting the absolute best result he can to give himself a chance. Because Red Bull are still going to have easily a good enough car for Max to win the championship. And Max will always be there, right where he needs to be. I mean, we saw in 2024, even in the races where Red Bull were really quite poor, Max was still putting his car right where he needed to in the results to keep himself at the top of the championship. So he will continue doing that no matter what. But with Leclerc, that's the only area of his game that I guess we haven't seen quite as of yet him able to do, is over the course of an entire season be as consistent and as great in the races as Max Verstappen. And I think ultimately that is what will separate them in Max Verstappen's favour. And yes, for the fifth time, I think it will be Max Verstappen taking yet another World Championship. And this World Championship will add absolutely a lot to his claim of maybe one day being called the greatest of all time. Last season definitely added quite a bit to that claim. This coming season definitely will, because 2025, I think we're going to see at least a three-way fight for the championship. Maybe a four-way fight, but I think most likely a three-way fight between Verstappen, Leclerc and Norris. Those are the main three I think we're definitely going to have in the championship battle. And even though Max is the best on the grid, we cannot, discount how good Leclerc and Norris are, especially with their pace. They are incredibly quick drivers. But Max, as I said a moment ago, in comparison to Leclerc, on race day, there is no one better than him. He is incredibly consistent. He is absolutely superb when it comes to making overtakes and also delivering in moments where he absolutely has to. And so often on the Sunday, he is able to still come out most of the time with the last laugh. We saw that so many times in 2024 where even if he didn't win the race, compared to Lando Norris, we're still able to end up with the last laugh of being, having finished ahead of Lando just through pure consistency whilst Lando or McLaren were doing whatever they were doing. And that is what separates him from the other very, very good drivers and great drivers on the Formula One grid is that consistency. And that's why Max Verstappen will win championship number 5 in 2025. But those guys are my early 2025 predictions. Again, please remember, don't take them too seriously. I am going to do a proper 2025 season preview between the end of testing and the first Grand Prix weekend in Melbourne, where I will give my final predictions. These are just early predictions. I will, of course, change these predictions once we get through pre-season testing. So do not be going crazy about, oh, you think this is going to happen. Again, these are early predictions based off of just how I'm feeling, and as well looking at kind of the momentum we've just come off from the second half of 2024 with the car performance, as I explained earlier. So again, don't take this too seriously, but let me know in the comments section below your early predictions for the Constructors and the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship. What do you think is going to happen? And I'll have a look to see what you guys think and see if there's any surprises in there that you guys think will happen for the 2025 season. But guys, until my next video, which should be a preview for pre-season testing, which comes up in a few days' time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.